We got one more conversation for the next 20 minutes with Michael Wright from the Commons Brewery joining me up here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, round of applause for Mike. So we're going to chat for a little bit, and then we'll have some time for you guys to get beers, but if you need to refill your glasses, certainly, feel free to go on back there. I invited Mike today because I thought, it was sort of a nice segue to have Carmen discuss. Yes. I thought it was a nice, sort of jumping off point to have Carmen talk about how they're sort of approaching the space and looking at some of the small businesses, perhaps, of a similar size to the Commons, and then, have someone like yourself talk to me about just what's involved in the day-to-day process of being an entrepreneur, especially in such a competitive marketplace like Portland with so many different breweries around here in Oregon, with craft market share being as high as it is here. I guess first and foremost, for those who aren't as familiar with who you are and how you got started, just share your story with us.
Okay, great. I'll give you the condensed version here. So about 5 years ago, actually this is the almost ridiculously cliche small business story. I had a 15-year career in corporate IT as a business analyst and a project manager, and that was serving me well, but it wasn't really keeping my interest. And during about half of that period of time, I started homebrewing, and boy, that definitely got my interest. And the hobby just continued to grow and grow and grow. And at some point, I decided to see if I could get licensed in my garage. And part of the reason behind that was, I really wanted to be in this industry, but I just couldn't completely leap from my position with a family, kids, house, car, the whole deal. So to my surprise, I was actually able to get licensed in the garage. What I had lacking was any sort of a plan. So licensed in the garage, next thing I know, I'm talking to Angelo Dieso from Brew who's putting together a small fest. And he asked if I would bring a beer, and so I did. Urban Farmhouse, which is the first beer that I brewed and sold out of the garage and continues to be our flagship beer. So that is how I got into this industry. It was a one-man show on a one-barrel system in my garage. And it was really not a business at that point, right? I mean, it was essentially just sort of a hobby.
Right, a licensed hobby.
A licensed hobby. I mean, it was legal, of course, but... and then, it didn't take very long where I had to decide if I was really going to do this thing or not. And so I was really good at spreadsheets at the time because I did a lot of that stuff. And they all told me don't do it. So I just threw those out the window and decided to leap anyway. So bought a teeny little 7-barrel system, rented 1,500 square feet in Southeast Portland, and gave it a shot. I definitely knew that I had some weaknesses at that point, so I hired a brewer, and shortly after that, hired another guy to help me do both distribution and sales. So it was a team of 3 for quite some time.
So what was that process like, going from licensed hobby to sort of jumping off the cliff into a full-fledged business?
It was scary. And I definitely started with the absolute minimum necessary equipment and space, actually even less than that, as I soon found out, to get a brewery up and running. And it was started as a production packaging brewery where the tasting room really was secondary. I didn't really know what to anticipate there. So it was definitely like jumping off the cliff without a parachute. I mean, I had no professional experience. I had never owned my own business, so everything was new. Everything was new.
If you had to do it again, would you do it the same way or would you do it differently?
If I had to do it again, would I do it differently? Yes, but that's only because I know so much more now.
How would you change? I mean, I guess sort of removing the fact that you kind of know all that you know now.
Yeah.
What might you have changed if you didn't do it the way that you went about things by, starting in the garage and then going to the 7-barrel system? Would you have done something drastically different?
Not drastically different. I mean, the ability to produce a little bit more beer and more emphasis on retail.
Okay. So the Commons brand, I mean, it's definitely, from my vantage point, one that is higher end, niche, nuanced,
Mm-hmm.
you know, going after what appears to be a very specific clientele. Somebody who's going to appreciate the beer for what it is, obviously willing to spend a little bit more. The styles aren't as mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
I guess talk to me a little bit about, you know, kind of your goal in crafting the brand and how you got to that sort of point to develop where you are now.
Yeah. So 5 years ago, there was half as many breweries as there are now, but even then there was 100 or so in Oregon. And just about everybody was making American ales. So really the decision to go off in this kind of, you know, European, Belgian-inspired path was two things. One, it was certainly out of interest because I was drinking a lot of those beers, but it was also, frankly, a good dose of lack of confidence on taking on these existing 100 breweries head-to-head, making IPA and Pale Ale, because I felt like they already had the market nailed, and I thought, I've got to take a different path here.
Right.
I'm just this little guy in the garage. I've got to try and find something a little bit different.
And so that was sort of your way of, I guess, cutting through the noise a bit?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess, you know, fast forward to 2015, how many opportunities are left for people to cut through the noise? Because it seems like every niche is filled, but, you know, every few months we see something new pop up, whether it's, I don't know, a shandy fad or a hard root beer fad or a new take on an IPA. I mean, there's, you know, putting grapefruit in beers. I mean, there seems to be something new that fills a niche that you didn't even know existed. Mm-hmm. How many opportunities are left out there, you think?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many opportunities are left. I think certainly in a, I'm really trying to avoid the word saturated. In a market like Portland that is very mature, we have a mature market here, you know, there's probably opportunities in, I'm going to sound very corporate, but like, you know, underserved neighborhoods. If you're going to be coming out with kind of the standard fare, you either better be really, you know, knocking it out of the park, or trying to be sort of, you know, maybe hyper-local again and really serve a neighborhood. Either that or you need to be exceptionally well-funded and you're going straight to regional or something. I mean, I think it's going to be tough to try and invent another new thing. I mean, having said that, somebody will do it tomorrow, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So where are you guys at today? Because you moved into a third space pretty recently.
Yep. So about a year ago, well, a couple years ago, it was clear that we needed to move out of the space that we were in. We had outgrown that, and it was because it was too small from the beginning. And we were on the search for a while, really wanted to stay in Southeast Portland. We thought it was part of our identity. And that became difficult, but at some point we were able to find a building. We bought the building, which certainly extended us, but it also provides a certain, you know, level of assurance that we might not otherwise have if we were leasing. And then we purchased a new brew house and built this place out over the last year, and then moved in March. So we've gone through a pretty significant transition in the last year, and we're still reeling, frankly, from that.
And still focusing primarily on serving the local market with your products.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the goal, essentially from the beginning, and I've kind of, you know, doubled and tripled down on that, is this plan to stay small. And I recognize that there's going to be some challenges associated with that. I mean, this industry in general, I think, is the foundation is a volume business. I mean, that's where you're going to get cost savings. So to try and, you know, sort of fight against that and stay small and stay sustainable and profitable is, I feel like sometimes is a bit of a contradiction. But right. I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because there is sort of this need to continue scaling in the brewery side. Mm-hmm. I mean, you always need to be kind of thinking about your next step, whether it's expanding distribution, expanding brew house capacity, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. There's always sort of this need to scale, but it seems like so many people grapple with this desire to stay small. but as you hire more people, you need to give them opportunities to grow professionally as well.
Yeah.
Talk to me about just kind of how you wrestle with that, and how you're considering all of your options, and where do you go from here?
I mean, I think wrestle is probably a good way to say it, and that's probably my role right now, is the in-house wrestler of all of those things. Because we're really at that apex. I mean, it's been clear to me recently that we're in this very messy phase. Even though we're still really small, we've just gone through this big transition, and we're trying to figure out where we're going next. And as you say, I mean, people want to grow within an organization. So there's lots of reasons we're in this really messy phase, and it's not entirely clear, where we will go. But I think what we're focusing on immediately is get back on our feet, stabilize, make the best beer we can, feed our partners the beer that they need to help us out, and along the way, just make sure that our employees are feeling appreciated, and that they're that they have the ability to grow somehow.
Right.
And those things are frankly daily challenges.
Right.
Yeah.
So how much can you actually brew in your new space? Like, what are we talking about size-wise?
We're small. So we have a 15-barrel brew house, which is new to us. And cellar capacity, we're maybe in 200 barrels a month range. So 2,500 barrels a year.
And do you feel that is a good size to weather sort of any storm that might come along? I mean, we hear a lot of talk about a potential bubble, or breweries that have kind of gotten over their ski tips, taken on a lot of debt to grow, and are kind of stuck in that middle of, okay, we've entered a few markets, we've got this big space. Do you feel like you're at the size right now where you're going to kind of fly under the radar, or is that something you're concerned about?
No, I'm concerned about it, for sure. We just spent a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I'm definitely concerned about that. But I feel like the bites we took were big, but that we can get our arms around them. And that we hedged our bets in a couple of places. For example, the brew house, we purchased the 3-vessel brew house, but we designed it as a 4-vessel brew house. We have enough room to do double the capacity out of our space that I plan on doing. So if for some reason it's not going to work to be a 3,000 to 5,000 barrel a year brewery, and we're willing and able to go for it, then we can do that, and we can start working 6-7 days a week and shift it and figure out if that's something we want to do. So we've given ourselves a little bit of breathing room in a couple of areas, but are fully focused right now on trying to maintain this relatively small, hands-on niche brewery.
Right.
Yeah.
And you guys feel like you're in a good space, a good place. Obviously took a little bit of risk. Have you thought about kind of where you go from here, and what the future might look like for your brand, and kind of how you've built where it fits in the marketplace and where that can go?
Lots of thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I think it's fair to say that I don't have this very well-defined 3 or 5 year plan. And part of this is just coming out of custom software development that I worked in for a while, and the things that are farther out are just much less clear. And so we have a vision, and we try and follow that vision. But exactly what it's going to look like in 2, 3, and 5 years, I don't know. Right now we feel good about what we're doing and where we're at, and we're going to continue on that path. If things change, in the local market or the global or the national market, that we feel like maybe we need to shift a little bit, then we'll absolutely do that.
Right.
I mean, that's one good thing about being small, is that we can be agile and nimble, and we can make little changes.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit here. Really curious to learn a little bit more about your experience in Portland as an entrepreneur. What's been sort of the most challenging part about just the marketplace here, and being a brewery here with so much competition around you?
Well, the most challenging part. Really, the most challenging part for me in this business and over the last 5 years is just not having the experience, and every day is a new thing, a new problem to solve, and so to learn about that and to figure it out and how to get over that. The market itself, it's just so ridiculously collegial. People helped us out early on, and there wasn't just this mountain of breweries doing what we were doing at that time. So there was a little bit of space there, and we've been able to grow. And I don't feel like there's just insurmountable challenges in this market. I feel like those challenges are almost not even brewery related. They're more about just running a small business.
Right.
Yeah.
As more people continue to enter the space, both locally and brands coming into Oregon, how does that impact what you do day to day, and how do you continue to stand out?
Right now, it doesn't impact what we do day to day. We are aware of it. We talk about it. We consider what other people are doing, and so far, we haven't felt like we needed to make any sort of radical change to answer to the other things that are coming out there. So right now, we're sticking with what we're doing. And again, we've been distracted, for the past year with moving and getting fired up on a new brew house. And so really, we wanted to just get resituated and do what we do and make the absolute best beer we can. So I don't feel like there's any crazy pressure right now to do things differently.
How much of that is because of the brand positioning that you guys have developed?
I don't know.
Like if you were an IPA, sort of ale, stout, traditional,
God.
do you think there'd be more pressure on you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right then. So, what's been your biggest takeaway now as an entrepreneur? Kind of, you jumped off the cliff a few years ago.
Yeah.
What have you learned that you would pass on to other entrepreneurs?
Well, delegate. Hire people that are smarter than me. People are the hardest part, frankly, right? We're the organic part of it. Everything else is a machine or a number or something. And so people are the hardest part about running a business. And if you want your people to be happy and feel appreciated and have them, grow within the company, that's the most difficult part, because we're all a bunch of weirdos. So that's the hardest part of running a business, and hands down, for sure. But it's also can be the most rewarding part, right?
Right.
My goal is to have my employees walk out of the brewery with a smile more often than not. Like, wow, I actually enjoyed that day. That's actually I think one of your questions you had was, what's the big audacious goal? And that is the big challenge for me.
Making sure that everybody's happy.
Well, as much as possible, within reason, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so much of that is going to be built around that sort of culture that you develop within your organization.
For sure.
So what is the culture at the Commons Brewery, and how have you sort of tinkered with it and figured out what it should be, and how have you gotten to that place?
So that's kind of at the core of the messy part right now, because for the past, I guess we're still in many respects in a startup phase, but for the last 4 years we've been this really teeny tiny, 3 to 5 people, and those people are just exceedingly passionate and are willing and able to do anything. Right? And as you grow, things have to specialize more. And when you do that, it gets more challenging for people to feel appreciated, find growth, and to be happy. And so that's definitely that messy part that we're trying to figure out right now. And that includes me, too. What do I do, right? I started out with, boots on and doing everything and working the bar and all of that stuff. And that my role is evolving day to day too,
Right.
and I'm trying to figure out where I fit in this place.
Huh.
But it's super fun.
Right. So that's something that so many brewery entrepreneurs, they wear so many hats in the very early stages of their business. Like you said, they're brewing, they're putting on the boots, they're behind the bar. I mean, they're putting in, 15, 16-hour days.
Yeah.
And that's almost like it's tough. It's tough to do that, but it's also a tough thing to give that up.
Yes.
And the process of sort of letting go of that can be challenging for a lot of folks. How has that been for you? You mentioned delegating. How have you decided what to delegate and what to keep?
Well, I mean, early on, my first employee I hired was Sean Burke, my head brewer. So in many respects, I gave that part up early on. I knew I was a home brewer, and I didn't have the skill set, frankly, to, without at least taking 6 steps back and obtaining that skill set, but we were already, we had traction, we were moving. So that was an early one. And I essentially, in many respects, handed off the reins to that head brewer and became a cellarman. I mean, I certainly had a lot of input and, was there day to day and still am, getting in there and, what are you doing? What's this? Or I want to know what's going on, right? I have my hands on it.
Right.
But along the way, if I can find somebody that I think is going to do a better job at that particular task than I will, then I'm willing and able to hand that off. And there might certainly be some reluctance there, and I might be a little bit nervous about that, but that's the challenge of being a business owner, I think. And the goal and the drive to let that up is that I believe that it will be better for the company.
Right. Well, the most successful business owners are able to do that really well, it seems. They're able to give up some responsibilities that, they might not be the best at, and they're able to see it very early on. I don't know if that's something you can develop over time, or if that's something you just kind of have the ability to do that, to be able to see these things before they happen. But it is kind of interesting to watch businesses evolve and watch owners kind of grapple with that and figure out what to give up and what to keep.
Yep.
So with that, a couple final questions before we all go fill up our beers. What's it like to work for you?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if any of my employees are here. I'd like to think that they are enjoying their jobs and getting to do something that they are really passionate about. I mean, my goal is to remove obstacles so that they can do what they do best.
Right. And you touched on it earlier, the big, hairy, audacious goal. Obviously, everybody, you want them coming out of the brewery with a smile every day, all your employees. But beyond that, is there something that you sort of aspire to attain in the world of beer, in the future? What's your big goal, your big, hairy, audacious goal?
Well, I mean, to make world-class beer. Yeah.
Are you doing that currently?
Well, I know that we can do better. Yeah.
And how are you going to do that?
We just continue to refine what we do. I mean, for example, that new brew house, I mean, going from our 7-barrel brew house to the new one that we have, that JV Northwest helped us design and build, we essentially went from a chisel and a hammer to a really nice, refined tool set. So we can do so many more things on the brew house that we have now than we were able to do before. Right. So that's number one. And then it's process and quality assurance, which, we've really been flying by the seat of our pants for the past 5 years. So now it's time to really get serious about what we do.
Right. What are some successful things, or some things that you think you're successful at, that you're doing today that might be sort of blinding you to new growth opportunities, that might be getting in the way of what you could be doing?
Well, being stubborn and not even considering other things besides farmhouse ales, for example, or these Belgian, French, German-inspired beers. I mean, we have to be careful to not get super stubborn about that. When the time is right to expand out, then that's what we should do. So that's certainly one that we have to be careful of.
And I know you're still new at everything, only a few years in, but how do you stay inspired?
It hasn't seemed difficult yet. I mean, I really enjoy going to work. I enjoy what's happening there, and I still have this memory of Sunday afternoons when, like, the weight of work would start coming down on me, and
building.
And I don't have that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
This guy's the most passionate dude I've ever met, dude.
Thank you.
I love this guy.
Appreciate it.
Michael, thank you.
Thank you.